She was just a waitress, with trembling hands and a wine stain spreading across his $1,000 suit. But when their eyes met, Vincent Ashford, the man who controlled empires, realized he had never truly seen anyone until this moment. But that moment hadn't arrived yet. 3 hours earlier, Vincent stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, watching the city burn gold beneath the setting sun. 62 floors below, 8 million people rushed through their lives, loving, grieving, hoping. He felt none of it. "Daddy!" The small voice came from behind him. He didn't turn immediately. He rarely did. Turning meant engaging, and engaging meant feeling, and feeling was a door he'd welded shut 8 years ago. "Daddy, you're doing it again!" Now he turned. Lily stood in the doorway of his study, her dark curls pulled into 2 uneven pigtails, her own handiwork, since he'd never learned how. She wore the yellow dress she'd picked out herself, the one with sunflowers that she said made her feel like summer. "Doing what?" he asked, his voice measured, controlled. "You're looking at nothing a lot." She walked toward him, her small shoes clicking against the Italian marble. "You look at nothing a lot." Vincent felt something twist in his chest. At 8 years old, Lily saw more than his entire board of directors combined. She had her mother's eyes. That was the cruelty of genetics, but none of her mother's coldness. Where that woman had been calculating, Lily was pure sunlight. "I'm looking at the city." "No." She reached him and tugged his hand. "You're looking at something that isn't there. You do it every time we're supposed to go somewhere fun." He knelt to her level, a motion that cost him more than any business deal. Eye contact with his daughter required a vulnerability he couldn't afford elsewhere. "We're going to dinner. Your favorite restaurant. Isn't that fun?" Lily studied him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "It would be more fun if you smiled." "I smile." "Not real smiles. Daddy smiles." She poked his cheek. "Real smiles go here. Yours only go here." She gestured to his mouth. Vincent caught her hand and kissed her fingers, buying time. How did he explain to a child that real smiles required a heart that wasn't filled with concrete? That her mother had taken his ability to feel when she'd walked out, leaving only a note that said, "I can't be caged, Vincent, not even by gold bars." "Tell you what, if something makes me really happy tonight, I'll give you a real smile. Deal?" Lily narrowed her eyes, negotiating. "And ice cream after?" Despite everything, his mouth twitched. "And ice cream after." "Deal." She shook his hand with exaggerated formality, then giggled and threw her arms around his neck. He held her, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo, and wondered, not for the first time, how something so pure had come from something so broken. Welcome back, family. If you're settled in and ready for this journey, subscribe now and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Because tomorrow, I've got another incredible story waiting for you. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. Now, let's begin. Across the city, in a 2-room apartment where the radiator clanged like a dying heartbeat, Grace Mensa peeled off her shoes and allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to feel the pain. Her feet were beyond aching. They had progressed through agony about 6 hours ago, and now existed in a state of numb throbbing that she'd learned to ignore. Double shifts did that. Triple shifts did worse. But the restaurant paid well, and tips from the wealthy clientele of Lumiere were the only reason Elijah had new shoes this month. "Mama!" The apartment door, 3 locks, all necessary in this neighborhood, flew open and her 6-year-old launched himself at her legs. Grace caught him, lifting him despite her exhaustion, and buried her face in his neck. "Hey, baby boy, were you good for Mrs. Patterson?" "I was so good." Elijah pulled back, his round face serious. "I only asked for cookies twice, and she only said no twice, and I only cried a little bit." Grace laughed, and the sound surprised her. Laughter had become rare, a luxury she couldn't afford. But Elijah had a gift for pulling it out of her when she had nothing left. "He was an angel," Mrs. Patterson said. "Only 2 cookies, and the crying was very dignified." "Thank you." Grace set Elijah down and pressed a folded 20 into the older woman's hand. "For tomorrow, too. I've got the private event at the restaurant. Might run late." Mrs. Patterson tried to refuse the money. She always did. But Grace was already closing the door, her pride as battered as her feet, but still intact. "Mama, are you tired?" Grace looked at her son, at the worry creasing his small forehead. He was 6. He shouldn't know how to read exhaustion. He shouldn't understand that some nights Mama cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear. "I'm fine, baby." "You always say that." "Because it's always true." Elijah didn't believe her. She could see it in the way he climbed onto the couch and patted the space beside him, reversing their roles. "Come sit. I'll tell you a story." Grace's throat tightened. David used to tell her stories. Her husband, her partner, her best friend. Gone 3 years now. Crushed between a delivery truck and a concrete barrier because someone was texting while driving. He'd left her with love, with memories, and with $87,000 in medical debt for the 2 weeks he'd fought for his life before losing. She sat beside Elijah and pulled him close. "Okay, storyteller, what's tonight's tale?" "Once upon a time," Elijah began, his voice taking on the dramatic cadence he'd learned from Saturday morning cartoons. "There was a mama who was a superhero, but she didn't know it because her cape was invisible." Grace closed her eyes. She could work all day and still make pancakes. She could carry 1,000 groceries and hold her son's hand. And even when the bad guys, like mean bosses and broken cars, tried to stop her, she just kept going. The end. "Did you like it?" "I loved it." Her voice cracked. "Best story ever." "Mama." "Yes, baby?" "Is it okay that I want a daddy sometimes?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Grace pulled back, looking at her son's face, seeing the hope and guilt warring there. He thought he was betraying David by wanting someone to fill that space. He was 6 years old, carrying guilt no child should carry. "Oh, Elijah." She pulled him into her lap. "Of course it's okay. Wanting love isn't wrong. It's never wrong." "Do you want someone too?" Grace thought about the question. Did she? She'd shut that door so thoroughly that she'd forgotten it existed. Love required trust, and trust required risk, and risk was something she couldn't afford. She had enough to worry about without adding heartbreak to the list. "I have you," she said. "That's enough." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. And I suspected, looking at her son's 2 old eyes, that he knew it too. At 7 p.m., Vincent's black town car pulled up to Lumiere. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a historic building in the Upper East Side, all soft lighting and exposed brick, and prices that could feed a family of 4 for a month. Lily pressed her face to the window. "It's so pretty, Daddy." "It is," he agreed, though he barely saw it anymore. Beauty, like joy, had become background noise. The driver opened their door.
Vincent stepped out, adjusting his charcoal Tom Ford suit, and helped Lily down. She immediately grabbed his hand, anchoring him to something human. "Ready?" She nodded solemnly, ready for fancy food and real smiles. They walked inside. Across the restaurant, Grace tied her apron tighter and checked her reflection in the service mirror. Her uniform was pressed, her modest makeup hiding the shadows under her eyes. She looked like someone who had her life together. She looked like a lie. "Mensa, table 12.
Her manager's voice cut through the kitchen noise. Grace grabbed her notepad and pushed through the swinging doors, scanning the floor for table 12. She spotted it immediately. The best table in the house, tucked into a corner with a view of the city lights. A man sat there, dark-haired, sharp-jawed, radiating the kind of power that made people instinctively step aside. His suit cost more than her car, her broken car, currently sitting in a mechanic's lot because she couldn't afford the repairs. But it wasn't the man who caught her attention. It was the little girl beside him, dark curls bouncing as she colored on the paper placemat, completely oblivious to the wealth surrounding her. She was maybe 8, with dimples and a yellow dress covered in sunflowers. Something in Grace's chest loosened. She approached the table, notepad ready, professional smile in place. "Good evening. Welcome to Lumiere. My name is Grace, and I'll be—" The man looked up. Their eyes met, and Grace forgot what she was saying. What would you do if someone from a completely different world suddenly made you feel seen? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories of unexpected connections. Grace had served hundreds of tables, thousands maybe. She had looked into the eyes of CEOs, celebrities, politicians, people whose faces appeared on magazine covers and whose names moved stock markets. None of them had ever made her forget her own name. But this man, his eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they held something she recognized. Not arrogance, though that was there too, swimming near the surface. No, beneath the polished exterior, beneath the tailored suit and the expensive watch and the practiced indifference, there was emptiness, a void shaped like loss. She knew that void. She lived in it. "You'll be what?" the man asked, one eyebrow raised. Grace blinked. Your server. I'll be your server this evening." She straightened, forcing professionalism back into her spine. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Wine. The 2015 Chateau Margaux." Of course. A bottle that cost more than her monthly rent. She wrote it down, her hand steady through sheer willpower. "And for the young lady?" The little girl looked up from her coloring, and Grace felt her heart squeeze. Up close, the child was even more precious. Gap-toothed smile, curious eyes, a smudge of yellow crayon on her chin. "Do you have chocolate milk?" the girl asked. "Lily," the man's voice carried a gentle warning, "this is a nice restaurant." "But I like chocolate milk." Grace knelt slightly, bringing herself to the girl's level. "You know what? I think we might have some secret chocolate milk in the back, the really good kind. Want me to check?" Lily's face lit up. "Yes, please." Grace smiled, a real smile, the kind she reserved for Elijah, and something flickered in the man's expression. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. "I'll be right back with your drinks," Grace said, standing. As she walked away, she felt his eyes following her. She told herself it was nothing. Rich men looked at waitresses all the time, usually with dismissal or, worse, with the kind of interest that made her skin crawl. But his gaze felt different, searching, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't known existed. "Stop it," she told herself. "He's a customer. Serve the table, collect the tip, go home." She retrieved the wine from the cellar, handling the bottle like the small fortune it was. The chocolate milk was easier. They kept some on hand for the occasional child who wandered into their adult world. She loaded everything onto a tray and headed back. The restaurant was busy tonight. A Friday evening crowd filled the tables. Couples on dates, business dinners, anniversary celebrations. Grace navigated through them on autopilot, her body knowing the route even when her mind wandered. She was thinking about Elijah, about the way he'd asked if he could have a daddy, about the guilt in his voice, as if wanting love was a betrayal of the love they'd lost. She was thinking about the void in the stranger's eyes and how it mirrored her own. She was thinking about how tired she was, how her feet screamed with every step, how she'd been running on 4 hours of sleep for 3 days straight. She wasn't thinking about the wet patch on the floor near table 12 where a busboy had spilled water 10 minutes ago and forgotten to put up a sign. Her foot hit the slick spot. Her ankle twisted. The tray tilted, and 750 milliliters of 2015 Chateau Margaux, $1,200 worth of fermented grapes, arced through the air in horrible slow motion and splashed directly on the chest of the man in the Tom Ford suit. The restaurant went silent. Grace stood frozen, the empty tray hanging from her fingers, watching the deep red stains spread across charcoal fabric like blood from a wound. She ran through the consequences: the cost of the suit, the cost of the wine, the certainty of termination, the impossibility of finding another job that paid this well, the bills, the debt, Elijah's face when she told him they had to move again. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning. I'll pay for the suit. The man stood up. He was tall, over 6 feet, and up close he could see the wine dripping from his lapel onto the pristine tablecloth. His jaw was tight. His hands were clenched. Here it comes, she thought, the rage, the threats, the demand to see her manager. She had seen it before, from men with far less money and far more ego. She braced herself. But the explosion never came. Instead, the man looked down at his ruined suit, then back up at her. His eyes swept over her face. The panic there, the barely concealed terror, the dark circle she had tried to hide with concealer. He saw her trembling hands. He saw the way she had unconsciously taken a step back like a dog expecting to be hit. Something shifted in his expression. "It's just a suit," he said quietly. Grace blinked. "What?" "The suit," he gestured to the spreading stain. "It's just fabric. Are you all right?" She stared at him. In 8 years of working in high-end restaurants, no one had ever asked if I was all right after I'd made a mistake. They asked for managers, they demanded compensation, they made me feel 2 inches tall because it was the only power they could exercise over someone who was already on her knees. She couldn't form words. "Daddy, you're all wet!" Lily had stood on her chair, peering at the damage with more curiosity than concern. "You look like you had a fight with a grape!" A sound escaped Vincent's throat. It might have been a laugh. She wasn't sure, because it seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. "I suppose I do," he said. "Here." Grace grabbed a napkin from the table and stepped forward, dabbing at the stain before she could think about what she was doing. "Club soda will help. If we act fast, we can minimize the—" She realized too late that she was touching him. Her head pressed against his chest, the napkin between them, and she could feel the warmth of his body through the wet fabric. His heart was beating. Fast. Faster than she would have expected from a man that seemed carved from stone. She looked up. He was looking down at her. The space between them had shrunk to inches. She could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, woodsy with hints of citrus. She could see the individual threads of silver at his temples, premature gray, that somehow made him more attractive rather than less. She could see the slight part of his lips, as if he had been about to say something and forgot what it was. She whispered. "Grace." Her name in his mouth sounded different, important. "Mensa!" The spell shattered. Grace jerked backward, nearly tripping again, as her manager bore down on them like a storm front. Richard Townsend was a small man who compensated for his height with his volume and his cruelty. His face was purple with fury. "What in God's name have you done?" He didn't wait for an answer, turning to the man. To Vincent, though Grace didn't know his name yet. "Sir, I am terribly sorry. This will be handled immediately. Your meal is complimentary, and we will cover all cleaning costs for your garment. And as for this—" He turned to Grace with undisguised disgust. "This employee,
I assure you she will be dealt with."
"Dealt with," Vincent repeated. His voice had changed. The softness was gone, replaced by something cold and sharp. "What does that mean, exactly?" Richard puffed up. "Terminated, of course. This kind of incompetence is inexcusable." "She slipped." "I'm sorry?" "There's water on the floor." Vincent pointed to the wet patch that had caused the accident. "No warning sign, no attempt to clean it up. That's not incompetence on her part, that's negligence on yours." Richard's mouth opened and closed. Sir, I don't think you understand." "I understand perfectly." Vincent stepped forward, and though Richard had several inches on him, the manager seemed to shrink. "You're looking for someone to blame because you're afraid I'll sue this establishment for the hazard that caused my suit to be ruined. So you're going to sacrifice an employee to appease me." He leaned closer. "I'm not appeased." Grace watched, frozen, as the most powerful man she'd ever encountered defended her to her own manager. This didn't happen. This wasn't how the world worked. Rich men didn't protect waitresses. They didn't even see them. "What would appease you, sir?" Richard's voice had gone oily, servile. Vincent glanced back at Grace. Something passed between them, an understanding, an acknowledgement. Then he turned back to Richard. "An apology. To her. For the wet floor that caused this accident." "You want me to apologize to her?" "I want you to do what's right. But if that's too difficult, I'll settle for an apology." The silence stretched. The entire restaurant was watching now, forks frozen halfway to mouths, conversations abandoned. Grace wanted to disappear into the floor. "I'm sorry," Richard finally spat at her, the words costing him visible effort, "for the wet floor." "And she keeps her job," Vincent added. "Of course." Richard's smile was a wound. "Of course she does." He stalked away, and the restaurant slowly returned to its murmur of conversation and clinking glasses, though Grace could feel the stares, the whispers. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. Vincent turned back to her. "Yes, I did." "Why?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at his daughter, who had returned to her coloring, apparently unbothered by the drama. When he spoke, his voice was distant, like he was answering a question she hadn't asked. "Because someone should have done it for—" He stopped, shook his head. "Because it was right." Grace studied him, this strange man, who smelled like expensive wine and looked at her like she was more than a uniform. "I'm still sorry about your suit." "Don't be." For the first time, something like warmth entered his eyes. "I have others." "Must be nice." The words slipped out before she could stop them, a flash of bitterness she usually kept buried. Vincent tilted his head. "It's not, actually, nice, I mean, having others." He gestured vaguely at his wine-soaked chest. "They're just things. Things don't keep you warm at night. They don't tell you stories or ask you questions you can't answer or make you feel like maybe there's a point to all of it." Grace felt her breath catch. "Daddy," Lily tugged his sleeve, "can I have my chocolate milk now?" The moment broke. Vincent blinked, as if waking from a dream, and stepped back. "Of course, sweetheart." Grace retrieved the chocolate milk she'd miraculously managed to not spill, and she set it in front of Lily. The girl beamed up at her. "Thank you, Miss Grace." "You're welcome, sweetie." "You're really pretty. Isn't she pretty, Daddy?" "Lily," Vincent's voice held a warning, but his cheeks had flushed slightly. "She is, though. And she's nice. She got me chocolate milk, and she made your suit into art." Lily pointed at the stain. "See? It looks like a butterfly." Grace looked. Somehow, impossibly, the red wine stain had spread in a vaguely butterfly-like pattern across Vincent's chest. She bit her lip, fighting a smile. "A butterfly," Vincent repeated.
looking down. That's one way to see it. Mama always said you have to find the butterflies, Lily said matter-of-factly. Even when things look bad, there's always a butterfly if you look hard enough. Grace's heart clenched. Your mama sounds very wise. Something shuddered in Vincent's face. She's not around anymore. It was her choice. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication, dark with pain. Grace recognized that weight. She carried it herself. I'm sorry, she said softly. Don't be. It was her choice. He sat back down, the vulnerability of moments ago replaced by his armor. We should order. Lily has school tomorrow. Of course. Grace pulled out her notepad, grateful for the return to professionalism. What can I get you? They ordered, steak for him, pasta for Lily, and Grace retreated to the kitchen, her mind spinning. It's just a suit. Things don't keep you warm at night. She's not around anymore. It was her choice. Who was this man? And why couldn't she stop thinking about him? The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Grace served other tables, smiled other smiles, but her attention kept drifting to table 12. She watched Vincent cut Lily's pasta into smaller pieces. She watched him listen, really listen, as the girl chattered about her school and her friends and her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. She watched him fail, repeatedly, to smile properly, and she watched him call him out on it each time. Not real, Daddy. I'm trying. Try harder. When they finally asked for the check, Grace brought it with hands that were steadier than they'd been all night. Vincent paid with a black card that probably had no limit. And when she returned with the receipt, she found something tucked beneath his wine glass. A business card. Vincent Ashford, CEO, Ashford Industries. On the back, handwritten in neat script, in case you ever need anything, or want to talk about butterflies. Grace looked up. Vincent was helping Lily into her coat, his back to her. He didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the card, just took his daughter's hand and walked toward the door. But Lily turned. She waved at Grace with her whole arm, her smile bright enough to light up the room. Bye, Miss Grace. Thank you for the chocolate milk and for making your suit into art. Grace waved back, her throat tight. At the door, Vincent paused. He didn't turn fully, just enough that she could see his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. Good night, Grace. And then he was gone. Grace stood there, holding his card, feeling like something fundamental had shifted in the universe. Like the floor beneath her feet had tilted a few degrees, and she was still trying to find her balance. Mensa! Richard's voice cut through her reverie. Table 7 needs clearing. Stop standing around like a statue. She tucked the card into her apron pocket, where it burned like a small fire against her hip. In case you ever need anything, or want to talk about butterflies. She needed so many things, but she'd stopped believing anyone would help provide them. Until tonight. Until a man in a ruined suit looked at her like she was worth something. Until he said 3 words that nobody had said to her in 3 years. Are you all right? Grace went back to work. But all night her hand kept drifting to her pocket, feeling the card through the fabric, reminding herself it was real. That night in his penthouse, Vincent stood under a scalding shower and tried to scrub the evening from his mind. It didn't work. Her face kept appearing. Those dark eyes, wide with fear and then wider with surprise. The way her hand had felt against his chest, even through the napkin. The bitterness in her voice when she had said, "Must be nice." And the way that had cut through him because she was right. It wasn't nice. Nothing was nice. He'd built an empire and found it empty. Stop it, he told himself. She's a waitress. You'll never see her again. But he gave her his card. Why did he do that? He never gave anyone his card. His assistant handled such things. His assistant handled everything because Vincent Ashford didn't do personal connections. Personal connections were vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities were weaknesses. Weaknesses got exploited. He'd learned that lesson from Victoria, his wife, his ex-wife, the woman who had smiled at their wedding and meant none of it. He shut off the water and stood dripping in the marble bathroom, staring at his reflection. 41 years old, silver threading through his dark hair, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a decade ago. He looked tired. He looked hollow. He looked like his father.
The thought made him recoil. Harrison Ashford had been a man of money and no warmth, a man who measured success in zeros and treated his family like employees. Vincent had sworn he'd be different. He'd sworn he'd break the cycle. But here he was, in a penthouse that echoed with emptiness, raising a daughter who had to remind him how to smile. "Daddy?" Lily's voice came from outside the bathroom door. Vincent grabbed a towel and wrapped it around his waist before opening the door. "What are you doing up, sweetheart? It's past your bedtime." Lily stood in her pajamas, the ones with the stars and moons, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about Miss Grace." Vincent's chest tightened. "What about her?" "She seemed sad. Even when she smiled, she seemed sad." Lily looked up at him with those too perceptive eyes. "Like you." "I'm not sad." "You are, Daddy. You're sad all the time. You just hide it really well." She tugged his hand. "But Miss Grace isn't good at hiding it. I could see it. She needs a friend." "Lily, can we go back tomorrow to the restaurant so she can be less sad?" Vincent knelt in front of his daughter. "We can't just keep going back to a restaurant because you want to see one of the servers." "Why not? You're rich. You can do whatever you want." The simplicity of childhood logic. If only it were true. If only money could buy the things that actually mattered. "That's not how it works, sweetheart." "Then how does it work?" He didn't have an answer. He pulled her into a hug instead, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, letting her warmth seep into his cold places. "Time for bed," he said finally. "We can talk more tomorrow." He carried her to her room and tucked her in, kissing her forehead with the tenderness he could never quite manage in the light of day. As he reached the door, her voice stopped him. "Daddy?" "Yes?" "I think Miss Grace would like you if you let her. And I think you'd like her too. You just have to stop being scared." The words hit him like a physical blow. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his daughter drift into sleep, wondering when an 8-year-old had become wiser than he was. Across the city, Grace sat at her tiny kitchen table, staring at the business card. Vincent Ashford, CEO, Ashford Industries. She had looked him up on her phone during her break. The results were overwhelming. Billionaire, self-made, youngest CEO of a Fortune 500 company in history. Photos of him at galas, at business conferences, at charity events, always alone or with his daughter, never with a woman. And then the older articles. The scandal 8 years ago when his wife had left him for a yoga instructor she had met at a retreat. The tabloids had feasted on it. Billionaire's wife chooses downward dog over upward mobility. And Victoria Ashford had given interviews talking about feeling trapped, feeling like a possession rather than a partner. Grace had felt a complicated surge of emotions reading those articles. Sympathy for Vincent, who'd been publicly humiliated. Anger at Victoria, who had abandoned her daughter. And something else, a recognition. Because Grace knew what it was like to have your life dissected by strangers. After David died, a local paper had run a story about the accident, and the comments had been brutal. Why was he driving so late? Was he drinking? Some people just can't manage money, as if his husband's death was a moral failing rather than a tragedy. In case you ever need anything, or want to talk about butterflies.
What did that even mean? Was that a come-on? A genuine offer? A rich man's whim forgotten as soon as he walked out the door? "Mama." Grace startled. Elijah stood in the hallway rubbing his eyes. "What are you doing up, baby?" "I heard you come home. You were walking loud." She winced. Her feet had been so sore, she was practically stomping. "I'm sorry. Go back to bed." But Elijah patted over to her, climbing into her lap with the easy assumption of welcome that children had. He spotted the card in her hand. "What's that?" "Nothing. Just something from work." "Can I see?" She should say no. She should put the card away and forget about it. Instead, she showed him. Elijah studied it with serious concentration. "Vincent Ashford. That's a fancy name." "It is. Is he nice?" Grace thought about the question. Was Vincent nice? He'd defended her. He'd refused to let her be fired. He'd looked at her like a person, not a servant. "I think so," she said slowly. "I think he might be." "Then why do you look worried?" "Because nice men with fancy names don't end up with waitresses who can barely make rent," she thought. "Because this isn't a fairy tale and I stopped believing in those when your father died." "I'm just tired, baby. It was a long night." Elijah nodded, accepting this. "Did you find any butterflies?" The question hit her like a truck. David used to say that, "Look for the butterflies, Grace," whenever things got hard. He'd said it when they lost their first apartment. He'd said it when her architecture firm laid her off. He'd said it on their wedding day when everything went wrong and they ended up getting married in a hospital chapel because her mother had had a heart attack during the ceremony. There's always a butterfly if you look hard enough. And Lily had said the same thing tonight, word for word. "Yeah, I think maybe I did," she whispered, her throat tight. The next morning, Grace awoke to discover her car still wouldn't start. She tried the ignition 6 times, listening to the engine cough and wheeze, and refused to turn over. The mechanic had said it needed a new transmission. The mechanic had said it would cost $2,400. Grace had $347 in her checking account and $12,000 in debt, and the restaurant was 12 miles away and her shift started in 2 hours. She sat in the driver's seat and allowed herself exactly 60 seconds to cry. Then she pulled out her phone and called for a rideshare she couldn't afford. At Lumiere, she arrived with minutes to spare, her careful budgeting shot for the month. Richard greeted her with a smirk that said he'd been hoping she'd be late, hoping for an excuse to finish what Vincent had interrupted. "Mensa, you're on Section 3 today." Section 3, the worst section, furthest from the kitchen, fewest tables, lowest tips. Punishment detail. "Of course," she said evenly, "whatever you need." His smirk faltered. He'd wanted a reaction. She refused to give him one. The lunch shift dragged. Section 3 was dead, just as Richard had intended. Grace made $23 in tips over 4 hours and spent most of her time polishing silverware and trying not to think about the transmission she couldn't afford. And then at 2:15 p.m., she looked up from a water refill and saw Vincent Ashford walk through the door. He was alone this time, no Lily, just him in a charcoal suit that was probably identical to the one she'd ruined, striding towards the hostess stand with the confidence of a man who owned the world, which, essentially, he did. Grace's heart hammered. She told herself it was anxiety. She told herself she was worried about another accident, another confrontation with Richard. She was lying, and she knew it. Vincent spoke to the hostess. The hostess pointed towards the back, towards Section 3, where Grace stood frozen with a water pitcher in her hand. He walked towards her. The restaurant seemed to fall away, the chatter fading to white noise, the other diners becoming ghosts. There was only him. moving through the space like a force of nature, his eyes locked on hers. "Miss Grace, I was hoping you'd be here. Mr. Ashford, I didn't expect to see you again. Vincent, please." Glanced around the nearly empty section. "Slow day. Punishment for the wine incident. My manager's idea of justice." Something flickered in Vincent's eyes, that cold anger she'd seen last night. "Where is he?" "No!" She stepped forward, putting herself between him and the main floor. "You already did enough. If you make another scene, it'll only make things worse for me." He stopped, the anger banking. "I wasn't going to make a scene." "Yes, you were. I could see it in your face." "You could see—" He paused, thrown off balance. "You don't know me."
I know that look. I've been serving people like you for 8 years. I know what it means when a powerful man's jaw tightens and his hands start to clench. She met his gaze squarely. You were about to make a scene, and I'm asking you not to. Vincent stared at her. She could see the war happening behind his eyes, the urge to fix, to control, to exert his will on a world that usually bent to his demands. And then, slowly, he unclenched his fists. You're right. I'm sorry. 2 apologies in 2 days. Grace was beginning to think the man was an anomaly. Thank you. I came because... He stopped, started again. I wanted to make sure you were all right. After last night, your manager seemed vindictive, petty, eager to exercise what little power he has over people who can't fight back. I was going to say unpleasant, but your version is more accurate. Despite herself, Grace felt a smile tug at her lips. I'm fine. I've dealt with worse than Richard Townsend. That doesn't make it acceptable. No, but it makes it survivable. They stood there, the silence stretching between them like a bridge being built. Grace was acutely aware of every detail, the way his cologne mixed with the restaurant's ambient scents, the slight crinkle at the corner of his eyes, the way he looked at her like she was a puzzle he genuinely wanted to solve. You never called, he said finally. I gave you my card. I didn't have a reason to call. I told you, if you need anything. And I told you, I'm fine. Are you? The question was soft, probing, too perceptive. Grace felt her walls go up automatically. What do you want, Mr. Ashford? Vincent. What do you want, Vincent? He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, stripped of its usual control. I don't know. I laughed, but it was hollow. I haven't known what I've wanted in 8 years. I come to work, I move money, I take my daughter to expensive restaurants where she asks for chocolate milk. I do everything right and none of it means anything. He met my eyes, and then last night, a woman spilled wine on my suit and looked at me like I was a person instead of a wallet, and I can't stop thinking about it. Grace's breath caught. I'm not interested in being anyone's charity project, she said carefully. If you're here because you feel sorry for me, I'm here because you make me feel something. The words came out rough, almost angry. I'm here because my daughter asked about you this morning, and I didn't have a good answer for why we couldn't come back to see you. I'm here because... Vincent, he stopped. This isn't a movie. Grace's voice was gentle but firm. You're a billionaire, I'm a waitress with a broken car and a 6-year-old and more debt than I'll ever pay off. Whatever you're imagining, whatever fantasy this is, it doesn't work. People like you and me, we don't what? She searched for the right word. Collide. We already did. He gestured at the space between them. We're colliding right now. And it needs to stop. She stepped back, putting distance between them. Thank you for defending me. Thank you for being kind. But I can't afford to get tangled up in whatever this is. I have a son who depends on me. I have bills that won't wait. I have a life that doesn't have room for what? For hope, she thought. For wanting things I can't have. For complications. Vincent studied her for a long moment. She couldn't read his expression, somewhere between hurt and understanding. All right, he said finally. I'll leave you alone. Thank you. He turned to go. Stopped. Turned back. But Grace? Yes. The card? Keep it.
Not because I expect you to use it, but because sometimes, he seemed to struggle with the words, sometimes it helps to know someone's out there, even if you never reach out. He left before she could respond. Grace stood in her empty section watching him walk away, feeling like she had just made a terrible mistake. That night, alone in her apartment after Elijah fell asleep, she pulled out the card again. In case you ever need anything, or want to talk about butterflies. She traced the words with her finger, hating how much she wanted to believe them. Then she put the card in her nightstand drawer and closed it firmly. Some doors were better left shut. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence, of routine, of Grace telling herself she'd made the right choice. Her car was still broken. She had started taking the bus, which added 2 hours to her daily commute and meant leaving Elijah with Mrs. Patterson even longer. The guilt was a physical weight on her chest. On the 4th day, Richard informed her that the restaurant was hosting a private event that Saturday, a charity gala for some foundation she'd never heard of. All hands on deck. No exceptions. "It's black tie," he said, his sneer firmly in place. "Try not to spill anything on the guests." Grace bit her tongue and nodded. Saturday arrived with the kind of weather that made New York feel like a punishment. Gray skies, bitter wind, threats of the season's first major storm. Grace left Elijah with Mrs. Patterson. "Be good, baby." "I'm always good, Mama." Debatable. And made her way to Lumiere, where the transformation had already begun. The restaurant was unrecognizable. Crystal chandeliers had been brought in, casting prismatic light across the room. White roses cascaded from every surface. A string quartet played softly in the corner. And everywhere. Everywhere people who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Women in gowns that cost more than Grace's annual salary, men in tuxedos that probably had their own insurance policies. She was given her section and her instructions. Smile, serve, be invisible. The holy trinity of working-class survival. For the first 2 hours, she did exactly that. She ferried champagne in canapes, cleared plates, smiled at guests who looked through her like she was part of the furniture. It was fine. It was normal. She had done this 1,000 times. And then she saw him. Vincent stood near the bar, a whiskey in his hand, talking to a silver-haired man she vaguely recognized from business magazine covers. He wore a tuxedo that made him look like a movie star, all sharp lines and dark elegance. Lily wasn't with him. Probably with a nanny, she thought, feeling a pang of irrational disappointment. She turned away before he could see her. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. "Grace?" She froze. His voice was unmistakable, that low register, that careful control. Slowly, she turned. "Mr. Ashford." "Vincent, remember? I didn't know you'd be here. I'm on the foundation's board. I had to be here, though I'd rather be almost anywhere else. That makes 2 of us." His smile widened slightly. "How have you been?" "Fine." The word was automatic. "Busy. You?" "The same. I wasn't sure I'd see you again." "Couldn't miss a gala." Richard made that very clear. Something flickered in Vincent's eyes at the mention of her manager. "He's still giving you trouble?" "It's fine." "That's not what I asked." Grace felt her walls go up. "I should get back to work." "Grace." "Mensa!" Richard's voice cut through the ambient music. "Table 7 needs champagne. Stop socializing." Vincent's jaw tightened. I saw it happen, saw the anger kindle in his eyes, and for a moment I was terrified he'd say something. But he didn't. He just nodded her once and stepped back. "Go," he said quietly, "but find me later, if you can." She wanted to say no. She wanted to say that finding him later was a terrible idea, that it would only make things harder, that she needed to stay far away from whatever this was becoming. Instead, she nodded and walked away. The storm hit at 9:47 p.m. One moment, the gala was in full swing, champagne flowing, laughter echoing, the string quartet reaching the crescendo of some piece Grace vaguely recognized. Then the lights flickered once, twice, and went out. Darkness, gasps, a woman screamed. Then the backup generators kicked in, casting everything in the eerie glow of emergency lighting, and someone shouted that the news was reporting a major nor'easter, that the roads were closed, that no one was leaving anytime soon. Chaos erupted.
Grace stood frozen in the middle of it, her tray of champagne flutes suddenly irrelevant. Her mind raced to Elijah. He was with Mrs. Patterson. He was safe. He was 7 blocks away in a building with no power and... Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out with shaking hands. "Elijah is fine," the text from Mrs. Patterson read. "We have candles. He's excited about the adventure. Don't worry about us. Worry about getting home safe." Grace exhaled, some of the panic receding. But home safe was looking increasingly impossible. The windows showed a world transformed. Snow falling so thick she couldn't see the streetlights, wind howling like a wounded animal. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard's voice, unnaturally calm, cut through the commotion, "we ask that everyone remain inside until the weather passes. For your safety, we are unable to allow anyone to leave the premises." Groans, complaints, the kind of protests that came from people unused to being told no. Grace looked for a corner to disappear into, somewhere she could ride out the storm without having to serve canapés to trapped millionaires. She found it near the coat check, a small alcove with a bench, shadowed by the emergency lights. She'd barely sat down when Vincent appeared. "May I?" He gestured at the space beside her. "It's a public bench." "That's not an answer." She sighed. "Sit down." He sat, leaving a careful distance between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. The chaos of the gala continued around them, raised voices, the clink of glasses, the string quartet gamely playing on, but in their little alcove there was something like peace. "Elijah, that's your son's name. I remember from the news articles." Grace stiffened. "You looked me up. I'm a researcher by nature. I like to understand things." He paused. "I'm sorry about your husband." "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't bring him up. Don't use my tragedy to build a connection. Don't—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "I wasn't trying to use anything. I was acknowledging your loss. There's a difference." Grace closed her eyes. She was so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of defending, tired of holding herself together with sheer force of will. "I'm sorry," she said after a moment. "That was unfair. It was protective. I understand protective." "Do you?" "My wife left when Lily was 6 months old. She said I was emotionally unavailable. She said being married to me was like being married to a bank vault." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She wasn't wrong." "Then why are you telling me this?" "Because you're sitting 3 feet away from me looking like you're ready to fight the entire world, and I recognize that look. I've worn it for 8 years. He turned to face her. "And because I'm trapped in this restaurant for God knows how long, and I have a choice. I can go back out there and make small talk with people who only see my net worth, or I can sit here with someone who looked at a ruined suit and saw a butterfly." Grace felt something crack in her chest, a small fissure in the walls she'd built. "The butterfly wasn't me," she said softly. "That was Lily." "I know, but you smiled when she said it. Really smiled, like it meant something. When's the last time something meant something to you, Grace?" The question landed like a blow. She thought about her days, the endless cycle of work and worry, the bills that never stopped coming, the nights spent lying awake wondering how she'd make it through tomorrow. She thought about Elijah's question. "Is it okay that I want a daddy sometimes?" "I don't remember," she admitted. Vincent nodded,
as if this was the answer he'd expected. Elijah asked about you again, this morning. He wanted to know if the pretty lady was going to be okay in the storm. She doesn't even know me. Children see what adults miss. She sees something in you. He hesitated. So do I. What do you see? Someone fighting? Someone surviving? Someone who's so busy holding everything together that she's forgotten to breathe. He met her eyes. I see someone who deserves more than punishment sections and broken cars and a manager who treats her like dirt. Grace's vision blurred. She blinked rapidly, refusing to cry in front of this man, this stranger who somehow kept finding the cracks in her armor. You don't know what I deserve. Maybe not. But I don't know you deserve less. The storm howled outside. Inside, the gala had quieted to a murmur, people settling in for the wait. The alcove felt like a bubble, separate from the world. Tell me about him, Vincent said. About who? Your husband, David, right? Tell me about him. Grace was quiet for a long moment. No one asked about David anymore. People treated grief like a contagious disease. They acknowledged it once and then pretended it didn't exist. He was an accountant, but that's not who he was. Who he was a man who could find joy in anything. He'd see a sunset and cry because it was beautiful. He'd dance in the grocery store if a good song came on. He'd make up stories for Elijah about brave knights and magical kingdoms. She smiled, though it hurt. He believed in butterflies. Butterflies. It was his thing. Whenever something went wrong, he'd say, "Look for the butterfly, Grace." Like there was always something beautiful hiding in the chaos if you looked hard enough. Her voice cracked. When Lily said it the other night, about finding butterflies even when things look bad, it was like hearing him. Like he was still here somehow, reminding me. Vincent was quiet. When Grace looked at him, his expression was unreadable. What happened to him? If it's not to a texting driver. 3 years ago, he was coming home from the night shift. Some kid looked down at his phone for 3 seconds, and that was it. David was in the hospital for 2 weeks before She trailed off. She didn't need to finish. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. It doesn't bring him back. No, it doesn't. Vincent was looking at his hands. When Victoria left, people kept telling me it was for the best. That I was better off. That Lily was better off. He shook his head. It wasn't better. It was just different. A different kind of broken. You still loved her? I don't know if I ever loved her. I know I wanted to. I know I tried. He looked up at the shadowed ceiling. I know I wake up every day feeling like I failed at something fundamental, and I don't know how to fix it. Grace studied his profile. The sharp jaw, the lines around his eyes, the silver at his temples. He looked younger when he was vulnerable. Softer. Maybe you can't fix it, she said. Maybe broken is just what we are now, and the best we can do is find someone else who understands what that means. Vincent turned to her. The emergency lights cast strange shadows across his face, but his eyes were clear. Is this what this is? Two broken people finding each other? I don't know what this is. Neither do I. Paused. But I don't want to stop finding out. Grace felt the walls crack a little more. And this time, she didn't try to rebuild them. Okay. Okay? Okay. We'll find out. Together. Something shifted in Vincent's expression. Surprise, maybe? Or hope? He reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm against hers. Solid. Real. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, something new began to grow. Have you ever found unexpected comfort during a crisis? A moment where everything fell apart, but somehow it brought you closer to someone you never expected. Share your story in the comments. I'd love to know. They talked until the storm began to quiet. 3 hours in that alcove. The world reduced to whispered conversations and the distant murmur of stranded gala guests. Grace learned that Vincent had built his company from nothing after his father cut him off for wasting his education on business instead of law. She learned that he hadn't spoken to his parents in 6 years, and that the silence was mutual. She learned that Lily had been premature, 4 weeks early, and that the first time Vincent held her, he'd cried. The only time he'd ever cried since his grandmother.
Vincent learned that Grace had wanted to be an architect. She'd graduated top of her class, had worked at a prestigious firm for 3 years before the layoffs. David had supported her through it all, telling her the right opportunity would come. And then David was gone, and the bills started piling up, and waitressing was the only thing that paid enough to keep them afloat. "I still have my portfolio," she said, "somewhere in a box in my closet. Sometimes I take it out and look at it, then I can't even recognize the person who made those designs. She seems like a stranger." "She's not a stranger. She's just buried." "Same thing." "No." Vincent squeezed her hand. They were still holding hands, had been for hours. "Buried things can be dug up. Strangers are gone forever." At midnight, the storm finally began to subside. The gala was officially over, the guests trickling out into the white world, their designer shoes sinking into snow that had never known the touch of a wealthy foot. "Let me drive you home," Vincent said. "You have a driver?" "Sent him home before the storm hit. I have a car, though, in the garage across the street." Grace hesitated. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was a bad idea, that she was in too deep already, that letting Vincent Ashford drive her home would cross some invisible line she couldn't uncross. But she was tired of listening to the logical parts of her brain. "Okay." The garage was cold, the concrete floor dusted with snow that had blown in through the entrance. Vincent's car was a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than Grace's apartment building. He opened her door for her, a gesture so old-fashioned it made her smile. "What?" he asked, noticing. "Nothing, just no one's opened a door for me since David." Vincent's expression softened. "Get in before you freeze." The drive was slow. The plows hadn't reached the side streets yet, and Vincent navigated through snow that came up past the wheel wells. Grace watched the city slide past, transformed into something magical and treacherous. "Turn left here," she said, as they approached her neighborhood. "Then 2 blocks down on the right." She saw the moment Vincent registered where they were. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Her neighborhood wasn't dangerous exactly, but it was a far cry from the Upper East Side. Bodegas instead of boutiques, walk-ups instead of doorman buildings. Don't what? Don't look at it like that, like it's something to be pitied." "I wasn't." "You were." She turned to face him. "This is my home. This is where Elijah is learning to ride a bike, where Mrs. Patterson makes him cookies, where I've built a life after everything fell apart. It's not much, but it's mine." Vincent was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "I'm sorry. Old habits." "What habits?" "Measuring value in square footage. My father did that. Judged everything by how much it cost. I spent 20 years trying to be different, and then I catch myself doing the same thing." Grace studied him, this complicated man with his billions and his broken places. "You're not your father," she said. "How do you know?"
Because your father never would have spent 3 hours talking to a waitress in an alcove. He never would have asked about David. He never would have—" She gestured between them. "Whatever this is." Vincent's eyes met hers. In the dim light of the car, with snow falling gently outside, Grace felt something shift between them, a door opening. "I should go in," she whispered. "Check on Elijah." "I know." Neither of them moved. "Grace." "Yes?" "I'm going to mess this up. I'm going to say the wrong thing, or do the wrong thing, or retreat into my vault when I should be reaching out. It's what I do. It's what I've always done." "I know." "And you're still willing to try?" She thought about David, about the way he'd believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself, about the butterflies he'd taught her to find. "Ask me tomorrow," she said. She got out of the car before he could respond, walking through the snow to her building's front door. At the entrance, she turned back. Vincent was watching her through the windshield, his face unreadable. She raised one hand, a wave, a promise, a maybe. He raised his hand in return. Then she was inside, climbing the stairs to her apartment, her heart pounding with something that felt dangerously like hope. The weeks that followed were a careful dance. Vincent didn't push. He texted, occasionally, small messages, nothing demanding. "Hope you're staying warm. How's Elijah? Lily drew you another picture." She responded equally carefully. "Fine. Great. Tell her I'd love to see it." Then one day, her car was delivered to her building. Fixed. A note in the passenger seat. "It's not charity. It's paying forward. Someone helped me once, and I never got to thank them. -V." She called him, furious. "I can't accept this." "Then sell it and buy one you can accept." "Vincent." "Grace, your son has been taking the bus to school in a snowstorm because you can't afford a $2,400 repair. Your pride is valid. Your situation is also valid. Let one win. Just this once." She stood in the street staring at her car, her fixed car, her paid-off car, and felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't know how to be someone who accepts help." "I know. Neither do I. We can learn together." She drove the car to Lumiere that night, and for the first time in months, she arrived at work without aching feet and a stressed mind. The first time she met Lily again was 3 weeks later. Vincent had invited her to the aquarium. "A neutral space," he said, "somewhere the kids could play while the adults figured out what they were doing." Elijah was nervous. "What if she doesn't like me?" "Everyone likes you, baby." "What if this one doesn't? What if she thinks I'm weird?" Grace knelt in front of her son, adjusting his jacket collar. "Then she'll be the weird one, because you are the coolest kid I know." "You have to say that. You're my mom." "I have to say nothing. I choose to say it because it's true." The aquarium was crowded. A Saturday afternoon, families everywhere. Grace spotted Vincent immediately, standing near the entrance with Lily, who was practically vibrating with excitement. "Miss Grace!" The girl broke free from her father's hand and ran toward them, pigtails flying. "You came? You actually came?" I caught her in a hug, laughing. "Of course I came. Your dad said there would be penguins." "There are penguins, and sharks, and a tunnel where you walk under the water and fish swim over you, and it's like being in a submarine except without the submarine." Elijah was watching with wide eyes. Grace nudged him forward. "Lily, this is my son Elijah. Elijah, this is Lily." The two children studied each other with the serious intensity of United Nations diplomats. "I like your shoes," Lily said. "They have dinosaurs on them." Elijah looked down at his sneakers, light-up T-Rexes that Grace had found at a thrift store. "I like your pigtails. They're like Pippi Longstocking." She gasped. "You know Pippi Longstocking? She's my favorite." "Mine too." And just like that, they were friends. They ran ahead toward the entrance, already chattering about Pippi's adventures, leaving their parents standing in their wake. "Well," Vincent said, appearing beside her, "that was easy. Kids are like that. They don't overthink. Unlike their parents. Unlike their parents." They walked together through the aquarium, following the sound of children's laughter, past the jellyfish tanks, where Lily and Elijah pressed their faces to the glass, past the shark tunnel, where both kids screamed in delighted terror, past the penguin exhibit, where Elijah declared that he was going to be a penguin scientist when he grew up. "What's a penguin scientist called?" "I don't know. I'll find out and then be that." At the cafe, they stopped for lunch. The kids sat together, deep in a conversation about whether mermaids were real. Lily, absolutely. Elijah, probably not, but he hoped so. "They're good together," Vincent said quietly. "They are." "Grace," he hesitated, "I want to tell you something about Lily's mother." Grace turned to face him. "You don't have to." "I know, but I want you to understand." He took a breath. "Victoria didn't just leave. She left a note saying she'd never wanted to be a mother, that Lily had been a mistake she'd been too scared to fix, that every time she looked at our daughter, she felt trapped." Grace's hand flew to her mouth.
"Lily doesn't know," Vincent continued, his voice carefully flat. "I told her mommy had to go away because of work. I'll tell her the truth when she's older, but for now—" He shook his head. "I've never told anyone this. My board thinks Victoria left because we grew apart. My family thinks it was mutual. But the truth is that the woman I married looked at our child and felt nothing. Vincent, I tell you this because I need you to understand what I'm protecting. When I said I was a vault, I meant it. Everything I am, everything I do is about keeping Lily safe, keeping her from knowing that her mother didn't want her." His voice cracked. "She's the best thing I've ever done, the only real thing, and I can't let anyone hurt her again." Grace reached across the table and took his hand. "I would never hurt her, or you. I know that. Logically, I know that. But logic doesn't help at 3 a.m. when I'm watching her sleep and wondering if I'm enough. You're more than enough." He looked at her, really looked, and something in his expression shifted, a door opening wider. "I'm falling for you. I'm trying not to, because it's terrifying and complicated and probably a mistake, but I'm falling anyway." Grace's heart hammered. "I'm falling too. What do we do about it?" She looked at their children, still deep in conversation about mermaids, looked back at Vincent with his sharp jaw and soft eyes and broken places that matched her own. "We keep falling, and we hope there's something to catch us at the bottom." Spring arrived slowly, melting the last of the snow and coaxing green from gray. And with it, something Grace hadn't felt in years began to bloom. Happiness. She almost didn't recognize it at first. The feeling would sneak up on her at odd moments, watching Elijah and Lily chase each other through Central Park, or laughing at one of Vincent's rare jokes, or simply sitting in comfortable silence while the children played. Each time, a small voice in her head would whisper, "This isn't real. This can't last." And each time she would push the voice away and let herself feel it anyway. "You're different," Mrs. Patterson said one morning as Grace dropped off Elijah. "Lighter." "Am I?" "You are. It looks good on you, honey. You've been carrying so much for so long." Grace thought about denying it, about explaining that she was just tired or just stressed or just getting by like always, but that wasn't true anymore, and lying felt wrong. "I met someone," she said instead. Mrs. Patterson's face lit up. "Tell me everything."
So she did. About the wine stain and the storm and the slow, careful way they'd been building something new. Mrs. Patterson listened with the wisdom of 70 years, nodding in the right places, laughing when Grace described Lily's declaration that her father needed to smile more or his face would get stuck. "She sounds delightful," Mrs. Patterson said. "She is. They both are. I keep waiting for something to go wrong." "Why?" "Because something always goes wrong. Because I loved David and he was taken from me. Because good things don't last." Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a moment. Then she took Grace's hand, her papery skin soft and warm. "Good things do last, sweetheart. Just not forever." "Nothing lasts forever. That's the price of being alive. But the love you had for David, that lasted. It changed you, made you who you are. And this new love, if it's real, it'll last too. Maybe not in the way you expect, but in the way it needs to." Grace felt tears prick her eyes. "When did you get so wise?" 70 years of practice. Now go to work before you're late and tell that billionaire of yours that he better treat you right, or he'll answer to me." That evening, Vincent surprised her. She'd finished her shift and walked out to find his Mercedes parked at the curb, Vincent leaning against the door in jeans and a sweater, casual clothes she rarely saw him wear. "What are you doing here?" "Kidnapping you." He opened the passenger door. "Get in." "I should get home to Elijah." "Mrs. Patterson has him. She's in on the conspiracy." She laughed despite herself. "Where are we going?" "It's a surprise." She got in. The headline was brutal. Billionaire's charity case. Ashford dating waitress with $12K debt. Below it, photos of them at the aquarium, photos of Vincent's car outside her building, a breakdown of her financial situation, her husband's death, her tumble from architect to server. Sources close to Ashford question whether Mensa's interest is genuine. She's clearly in over her head, one insider claims. This is a woman who couldn't afford to fix her car. Suddenly, she's dating one of the richest men in the country? The math doesn't add up. Grace stood in her apartment, staring at her phone, and felt the ground crumble beneath her feet. It wasn't just the article. It was the comments, hundreds of them, calling her a gold digger, a con artist, a desperate single mom exploiting a lonely billionaire. They dug up David's death, twisted it into a sympathy play. They'd found her old Instagram, posted her architecture designs with mocking captions about delusions of grandeur. The phone rang, Vincent's name on the screen. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. The third time she answered. "Grace, I just saw the article. Did you know this would happen?" "What? No, I had no idea." Because people like you have PR teams. People like you manage your images down to the last detail. And you're telling me no one mentioned that dating a waitress might be a story? I don't care about stories. I care about you. Do you? The words came out harsher than she intended, because from where I'm standing, it looks like I was just a project, a way to prove you're not your father, not your ex-wife, not the cold billionaire everyone thinks you are. That's not, wasn't it? The car, the aquarium, the fancy restaurant, was any of it real? Or was I just your charity case, your chance to play hero? Grace, please. Do you know what they're calling me? Do you know what my son is going to hear when he goes to school tomorrow? Silence on the line. I knew this was a mistake. Grace was crying now, the tears hot and angry. I knew it from the beginning. People like you and people like me don't collide. We just crash. That's not true. These past months, everything we've built. Built on what? A fairy tale? A fantasy where the billionaire saves the struggling single mom and they all live happily ever after? She laughed, but it was bitter, broken. This isn't a movie, Vincent. This is my life, my son's life, and I can't afford to be your public relations disaster. You're not a disaster. You're the best thing that's happened to me in 8 years. And what about next week, next month, when the next article comes out, or your board pressures you to distance yourself, or Lily asks why people are saying mean things about Miss Grace? I'll handle it. I'll handle all of it. You can't. Don't you understand? You can't handle this because you can't control it. You can throw money at a broken car, but you can't throw money at public opinion. You can't buy me a new reputation. Then I'll make them retract. Stop. Grace's voice cracked. Just stop. I don't want you to fix it. I don't want you to save me. I just want... She trailed off, not knowing how to finish. What? Vincent's voice was raw. What do you want? You, she thought. I want you. I want this life we've been building, these days that feel like light. I want Lily's laugh and Elijah's smile when he sees you walk through the door. I want to believe that broken things can be mended. But wanting wasn't enough. It had never been enough. I want you to leave me alone, she said. I want to go back to my life before the wine stain and the storms and the butterflies. I want to stop hoping for things I can't have. Grace! Goodbye, Vincent. She hung up. Then she turned off her phone, gathered Elijah from Mrs. Patterson, and held her son close while he asked questions she couldn't answer. Vincent stood in his penthouse, staring at the phone in his hand, and felt something inside him crack. I knew this was a mistake.
People like you and people like me don't collide. Leave me alone." He hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered, pieces scattering across the Italian marble. "Daddy?" Lily stood in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. "Go back to bed, sweetheart." "Why are you sad?" "I'm not." He stopped. Lily deserved better than lies. "I made a mistake. I hurt someone I care about." "Miss Grace?" He nodded. Lily walked toward him, her small face serious. "Can you say sorry?" "I don't think sorry is enough this time." "Why not?" "Because I should have protected her," he thought. "Because I should have anticipated this, prepared for it, built walls around her the way I built walls around Lily. Because I dragged her into my world without thinking about what it would cost her. Because some hurts are too big for sorry." Lily considered this. Then she climbed into his lap, something she rarely did anymore, and pressed her small hand against his chest. "Your heart is still beating," she said. "Yes. So is hers." He looked at his daughter, this wise, wonderful girl who saw butterflies in wine stains. "What should I do?" "Wait," Lily said simply. "And when she's ready, be there." "What if she's never ready?" "Then you were still lucky. You still had the butterflies, even if they flew away." Vincent held his daughter close and wondered when an 8-year-old had become the wisest person he knew. 2 weeks passed. Grace went through the motions. She woke, she worked, she came home to Elijah. She smiled when she was supposed to smile and answered when she was supposed to answer. She was a ghost wearing her own skin. The articles eventually died down, replaced by some celebrity scandal, some political drama, the endless churn of news. But the damage was done. Whispers followed her at work. Richard's smirk had become permanent. She'd found a printout of the article in the break room, highlighted and annotated with cruel commentary. She didn't report it. What was the point? Elijah noticed. Of course he noticed. "Mama, are we ever going to see Mr. Vincent again?" "I don't know, baby." "And Lily?" The question hurt more than she expected. "I don't know." "Did you have a fight?" "Something like that." Elijah was quiet for a moment, processing in that serious way of his. "Daddy used to say that fights don't mean it's over. They just mean you have to try harder." Grace felt tears prick her eyes. Daddy was very wise. "So are you." Elijah climbed into her lap. "You're sad, Mama. I don't like when you're sad." "I know, baby. I'm sorry." "Can Mr. Vincent make you unsad?" "Yes," she thought. "He could. If I let him." But letting him meant risking again. Letting him meant opening the door she'd shut shut. Letting him meant believing that love was stronger than fear. She didn't know if she was brave enough. Across the city, Vincent was fighting his own battle. The board meeting was brutal. His quarterly numbers were strong. They were always strong. But the conversation had nothing to do with numbers. "The Mensa situation," Harold Pierce said, 60 years old, silver-haired, the voice of conservative caution, "it's created complications. My personal life isn't the board's concern. It is when it affects shareholder confidence. The stock dropped 2% after those articles. 2%! We've weathered worse. This isn't about weathering, Vincent. It's about perception. You've built this company on stability, on trust, and now the papers are saying you've lost your head over a waitress." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Her name is Grace." "I don't care what her name is. I care about this company's reputation." "Then perhaps you should care that our CEO is being pressured to end a relationship because it doesn't fit a boardroom narrative." The room fell silent. Vincent stood up.
I've given this company everything. My time, my energy, my marriage. Yes, Victoria left because I was never home, and I was never home because I was here building value for people who see human beings as line items on a spreadsheet. He looked around the table, at the faces that had congratulated him on every success and doubted him at every turn. I'm done. Pierce blinked. Excuse me? I'm resigning, effective immediately. I'll maintain my shares, but I'm stepping down as CEO. Chaos erupted. Protests, arguments, accusations of insanity. Vincent walked out. In the elevator heading down from the 47th floor, he felt something inside him, freedom. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number.
Mr. Ashford, my name is Mrs. Patterson. I watch Grace's son sometimes. She doesn't know I'm sending this, and she'd probably be upset if she did. But someone needs to tell you. She's not okay. She misses you. And more importantly, she needs someone to fight for her instead of just giving up. You seem like a fighter. Prove it. Vincent stared at the screen. Then he knew exactly what he had to do. 3 days later, Grace arrived home from work to find Vincent sitting on her stoop. He looked different, tired, rumpled, lacking the polished veneer she'd come to associate with him. He wore jeans and a simple shirt, no designer labels in sight. His hair was uncombed. He looked, for the first time she'd met him, completely human. "Before you tell me to leave," he said, standing, "I need to say something. Vincent, I quit, resigned, walked out of a board meeting and told them I was done." He stepped toward her. "The company, the stock price, the reputation, I don't care about any of it. I care about Lily. I care about waking up in the morning and feeling like my life means something. And I care about you. You quit your company? Your billion-dollar company? It wasn't making me happy. It was just making me busy." He pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box, worn at the edges. "This was my grandmother's. She gave it to me before she died and told me to give it to someone who made me feel like the world was bigger than my problems." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, not a diamond, but a simple band of gold with a small butterfly engraved on the surface. "I'm not proposing," he said quickly. "Not yet. It's too soon and there's too much we need to figure out. But I want you to have this, as a promise, as a proof that I'm here, that I'm not going anywhere, that I will fight for this until you tell me to stop." Grace's vision blurred. "The articles will fade. They always do. Your board isn't my board anymore. I'll start something new, something smaller, something real. People will still talk. Let them. I don't care what people say. I only care what you say." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the vulnerability in his eyes. "What do you say, Grace? Can we try again?" She thought about David, about the butterflies he'd taught her to find, about his voice in her memory. There's always something beautiful hiding in the chaos if you look hard enough. She thought about Elijah, asking if he could want a daddy, about Lily declaring that her father needed to smile more, about two broken people who'd somehow found each other in a storm. She thought about fear and how it had kept her safe for 3 years, and she thought about love and how it had found her anyway. "Yes," she whispered. Vincent's face transformed. "Yes?" "Yes, we can try again." She reached out and took the box from his trembling hands. "If you're giving me this ring, I'm giving you something too." "What?" She stood on her toes and kissed him, softly at first, then deeper, the way she'd wanted to since that first night in the alcove. "A butterfly," she said when they broke apart, "the one David taught me to find." 1 year later. The restaurant was the same. Checkered tablecloths, candles dripping onto Chianti bottles, the smell of garlic and tomatoes, and something that felt like home. But everything else had changed. Grace sat across from Vincent, watching him try to wrangle spaghetti onto his fork while Lily and Elijah argued about whether it was cheating to use a spoon. "It's definitely cheating," Lily insisted. "Real Italians don't use spoons. Real Italians invented spoons. I looked it up. You look everything up. Because I like being right." Grace caught Vincent's eye and smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached all the way to her heart. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. Just this." "This?" "This family dinner. These kids, you with marinara sauce on your chin." He wiped his chin hastily. "Better?" "Worse, actually. Now it's on your cheek." Lily giggled. "Daddy's a mess." "Daddy's the best mess," Elijah corrected, with the fierce loyalty he'd developed for the man who'd become something she dared not hope for. A father. Not a replacement for David. Never that. But a new chapter. A different kind of love that didn't diminish what came before. After dinner, they walked out to the car. The night was warm, summer finally arriving after a long spring. Fireflies blinked in the darkness, pinpricks of light scattered like stars brought to earth. "Look," Lily breathed. "Butterflies." "Those are fireflies, actually." "Same thing. They're both beautiful and they fly." Grace felt Vincent's hand slip into hers. She squeezed it, grounding herself in his warmth. "I have something for you." "Both of you, actually." He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 envelopes, handing one to Elijah and one to Lily. "What's this?" Elijah asked. "Open it." The children tore into the envelopes simultaneously. Inside, each was a photograph, the same photograph. A house, white with blue shutters, surrounded by trees, a tire swing in the front yard, a porch with rocking chairs. "I don't understand," Lily said. "It's our new house," Vincent explained. "It's about an hour outside the city, close enough to visit, far enough to breathe." He knelt to their level. "It has a big backyard for running around, and a room for each of you right next to each other, and," he glanced up at Grace, "a studio space. For architecture, if someone wanted to start designing again." Grace's breath caught. "You didn't." "I did. It needs work, a lot of work. But I thought maybe we could do it together. Build something from scratch. A home, not a penthouse. A life, not just an existence." Elijah looked at his mother, his eyes wide. "Can we, Mama? Can we live in a house with a tire swing?" Lily grabbed Grace's hand. "Please say yes. Please, please, please." Grace looked at the photograph, at this impossible gift from this impossible man who'd walked into her life with a wine stain on his suit and changed everything. "I never thought I'd have this again. A family. A future. Someone who fights for me instead of against me." "You deserve it," Vincent said. "You always deserved it." "So do you." She pulled him to his feet and kissed him, right there in the parking lot, with fireflies blinking around them and their children making exaggerated gagging sounds. "Is that a yes?" he asked when they broke apart. "That's a yes." Elijah and Lily erupted into cheers. They ran in circles around the car, chanting, "New house, new house!" while the adults watched with the particular exhaustion and joy of parents everywhere. "There's one more thing," Vincent said. "You've done enough." "It's not from me. It's from her." He nodded toward Lily, who was stopped running and was approaching with unusual seriousness. "Miss Grace?" Lily held out her hand. In it was a folded piece of paper. Grace unfolded it. A child's drawing of 4 stick figures standing in front of a white house with blue shutters. Above them, Lily had written in careful crayon letters, "My family." The tears Grace had been holding back finally spilled over. "I know you're not my real mom, but you feel like a mom, and I was wondering if maybe you could be my almost mom, just until I'm ready for a real one." Grace knelt down and pulled Lily into her arms. "I would be honored to be your almost mom, for as long as you want me." Lily hugged her back, fierce and certain. "Forever," she said. "I want you forever." Over Lily's shoulder, Grace saw Vincent watching them, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Look for the butterflies," David had always said. "There's always something beautiful hiding in the chaos if you look hard enough." She'd found them. Against all odds, against all reason, she'd found them. In a wine stain shaped like wings, in a storm that brought them together, in two children who'd made a family out of broken pieces, and in the man standing before her who'd given up everything to fight for the only thing that mattered. 6 months later,
The house was finally finished. Grace stood in her studio, a room of her own with drafting tables and natural light, and the kind of space she dreamed about in her architecture school days. On the wall hung her first new project, a renovation proposal for Mrs. Patterson's building, complete with accessible features and community spaces. "Mama, Mr. Vincent says dinner's ready." Elijah's voice echoed up the stairs. Grace smiled, setting down her pencil. "Coming." She walked down to the kitchen where chaos reigned. Vincent was attempting to cook pasta while Lily supervised, and Elijah set the table with mismatched plates they'd found at a thrift store. "The sauce is lumpy," Lily announced. "The sauce is supposed to be lumpy," Vincent countered. "No, it's not. Miss Grace's sauce is never lumpy." "Miss Grace has years of practice. I'm still learning." Grace leaned against the doorframe, watching them. The evening light came through the windows, painting everything gold. The tire swing swayed gently in the backyard. From somewhere down the road, a dog barked. "What are you smiling at?" Vincent asked, catching her eye. This, everything." He crossed the kitchen and kissed her forehead. "Happy?" "More than I knew I could be." "Good, because I have one more surprise." Vincent, "Last one, I promise." He pulled a small box from his pocket, not the grandmother's ring box, but something new. "What is this?" "Open it." Inside was a simple gold band. Engraved on the inside, "Every storm brings butterflies." Grace looked up at him, her heart pounding. "I know I said I wasn't proposing yet, but yet has turned into now, and I can't imagine spending another day without making this official." He took a breath. "Grace Munsa, you are the most stubborn, beautiful, resilient person I've ever met. You taught me how to smile again. You gave me a family I never knew I needed. You showed me that broken things can become beautiful." He knelt, right there in the kitchen, with lumpy sauce bubbling on the stove and two children watching with bated breath. "Will you marry me?" Grace looked at the ring, at Vincent, at Lily and Elijah holding hands, practically vibrating with excitement. She thought about David and how he would have loved this, the chaos, the joy, the imperfect perfection of it all. She could almost hear him laughing, see him nodding his approval. "There's always a butterfly, Grace." She had found it. "Yes," she said, 1,000 times yes. The wedding was small, just family and a few friends in the backyard of their new house, with fireflies replacing candles and wildflowers replacing bouquets. Lily was the flower girl. Elijah was the ring bearer. Mrs. Patterson cried through the entire ceremony.
When the officiant asked if there were any objections, Lily shouted, "No!" so loudly that everyone burst out laughing. And when Vincent kissed his bride, his wife, the children ran circles around them, chanting something that sounded suspiciously like, "Finally, finally, finally!" Grace pulled back from the kiss and looked at her husband, at his genuine smile, the one Lily had demanded for so long, at the light in his eyes that hadn't been there the night they met. "Happy?" she asked. "You keep asking me that." "I like the answer. Then I'll keep giving it." He cupped her face in his hands. "Yes, today, tomorrow, and every day after. Yes." She kissed him again, and the children groaned, and the fireflies blinked their approval. And somewhere in the soft summer air, a butterfly landed on a wildflower, just for a moment, before lifting off into the endless, impossible, beautiful sky. Have you ever found love in the most unexpected place or person? A second chance that changed everything? Share your story in the comments. Your butterfly moment might inspire someone who needs to hear it. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe. More stories of hope and redemption are coming soon. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If this story touched your heart, the next one will move you even deeper. It's wilder, more emotional, and completely unforgettable. Click the video on your screen right now. I promise you won't regret it.